This is Second Down on ESPN Radio. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko. Glad to have you hanging out with us here on this Tuesday afternoon. Just a couple of days away from the NFL draft. Jacksonville with that number one overall pick. Seemed like for a long time was kind of sewn up, and everybody was doing the mock drafts from there. The last couple of days have flipped it on its head as now Georgia's Travon Walker is the odds-on favorite. Now, I spent a lot of time yesterday chastising folks for mislabeling Travon Walker. And I just think it's the reality of the situation now is people don't know how to differentiate these position groups, and in their minds have labeled Travon Walker or lumped him in the group with the Aidan Hutchinsons and with the Kayvon Thibodeaux. They're from Oregon, right? They've labeled him as an edge rusher, and I think that's a disservice, but it is what it is. People are going to keep saying that about him. But I did come across from some interesting stats on Twitter. Austin Gale on Twitter put it out there, and he said, if you're looking at Travon Walker compared to some of these other guys, and you're looking at him as an edge and then trying to compare his production, that isn't fair just based off of snaps. If you look at Aidan Hutchinson in his career at Michigan, had about 1,600 snaps at an edge rushing position. If you look at it, Kayvon Thibodeaux had over 1,300 snaps at an edge rushing position. And if you look at Travon Walker, had a little less than 600. The man is a defensive lineman. Mm-hmm. The guy lines up on the inside of defensive ends a lot. Again, whatever you want to call these positions, because apparently it doesn't matter anymore. What I used to think it was you going from the outside in, you had nose tackles, defensive ends, and then your outside linebacker edge rushers, right? That's what I used to think. Or if you're in a 4-3, you have your strong side defensive end, a couple of defensive tackles, and then you have your defensive end / outside linebacker, right? Your pass rusher. People just want to put Travon Walker on the outside. The reality of the situation to me is this. Trent Baalke, the general manager for the Jacksonville Jaguars, sees that he has an all-pro type of player on one side of his defense in Josh Allen. Former SEC sack leader, had over 10.5 sacks, or had right at 10.5 sacks his rookie year in the NFL. Pretty elite edge rusher, right? What he's looking at is he needs somebody on the other side of him, and I think the reason why Travon Walker has become such, or just a meteoric rise, is people are starting to listen to what is being said in the front offices more than projecting off of their own evaluation of these players. If you think Travon Walker is like the 25th best player in college football, I don't know what to tell you, because obviously a lot of GMs disagree with you. If he's a top 5 player, he can go number 1. So I think at that point, it just becomes a situational need thing, right? Where you're looking at these teams and there's no player in this draft where you're just like, yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah.
Right? There's no Jadeveon Clowney. There's no Myles Garrett. There's no Trevor Lawrence where you're just like, yep, yeah, that's him. He's the number one overall pick. A lot of times those offensive linemen, right? Where you're like, yeah, that guy's that good.
Right.
Where he's shut it down. That's your number one overall pick. He's going to be your left tackle for the next 15 years. Even though I do think there's like 2 or 3 guys in this class where that's the case. There's a bunch of A- to B+ level talent. There's no like A+ can't miss.
Yeah.
Even the guy a lot of people thought was that guy in Aidan Hutchinson, he's got a lot of big question marks around him. Like he disappeared in a lot of games. Mm-hmm. I know I've said this ad nauseum, but 9.5 of his sacks came in 3 games this year.
Exactly.
So everyone keeps pointing at his productivity, and he was extremely productive in 3 out of 14 games.
Right.
And I think NFL teams are looking for a little bit more than that. And again, I think it's extremely situational. If Detroit had the number 1 overall pick, Aidan Hutchinson is going to Detroit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I think Jacksonville, the reason they're talking about Travon Walker is a fit thing. They have their edge rusher in Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Right? And with the defense that they want to play, they need somebody on the other side that can stand up that tackle and set that edge. And I don't think there's a better player in this class to do that than Travon Walker. 6'5", 275 pounds, can probably bulk up a little bit if they wanted him to because he carries 275 very well. I don't know if a lot of people remember this, but his freshman year at Georgia at 6'5", 280 pounds, he was on kickoff coverage.
Right.
Like running full, like that's horrifying.
He has the athleticism for it, right? I mean, you shared a couple videos or a video yesterday of him tracking down
IG Hall,
yeah, there you go. Yeah. But tracking down a insanely speedy wide receiver in the national championship game. So no big surprise there. I do like, I'm a little surprised this didn't happen sooner because like you said, that's a very good point. They're starting to go off what they actually hear from the teams and the GMs and everything like that instead of just their own projection. I feel like for the longest time, it was just kind of like formulaic, right? It was just like, okay, we got to put this mock draft together. Like you said, it's a bunch of A to B plus players in this draft. And it's like by default, Aidan Hutchinson got chosen as the one. All right, he's going number one, and we'll go with everybody else. And I just kept looking at it like, why is it just understood or just put together? Okay, by default, this guy's going number one. It's because he's an edge rusher, and because he has he has some stats and came on big later in the year. But again, it was like, okay, when is this trend going to stop? Because I've never really felt like, yeah, he's the one. He is by far the best player in the draft, and he's definitely going to go number one. It just felt like for 2 or 3 months that it was, okay, yeah, we'll put him at number one and we'll figure out the rest and we'll figure that out later, basically. And I think we're in the figuring that out later part of the year and of the draft process where it's, okay, now we have more information and we actually know what these guys are thinking. So we can now actually put out the mock drafts that are based on what we've learned instead of just like putting it together, instead of just throwing it together and saying, all right, well, defensive end, you know, the person that everyone's talking about, or most people are talking about, let's just throw him up at number one.
Yeah.
And figure it out later.
And I don't think it's just the quarterbacks in this class, like, which I wouldn't be surprised if a quarterback's not taken inside the top 10. Because again, with these mock drafts, you're going to talk yourself into, oh, somebody's going to trade up. Who are you trading up for? Like Malik Willis, I think in any other draft is a late first, second round pick. Right.
And think about that. Like Lamar Jackson was late first round.
Right.
Lamar Jackson.
Correct.
And Malik, I'm not saying anything bad about Malik Willis, but like in college, he wasn't Lamar Jackson. So
I don't think it's saying anything bad, right? I think it's just being completely honest about it.
Yeah.
And again, there's like, look at the wide receivers, right? Nobody in this class is better than Jamar Chase. And so you look at all of these different position groups, and there's a bunch of depth in this, right? It's not all about the stars at the top, right? There's a bunch of depth that can be had in this. And that's why number one, I don't think there's going to be a lot of trades. If you want a wide receiver, you can wait and you're going to land on a wide receiver. Just think about the number of dudes who are going to be good, impactful NFL players that I don't think there's a ton of separation between, right? I don't think there's a ton of separation between a Garrett Wilson and a George Pickens or a John Mechie or a Jameson Williams, right? I don't think there's a ton of separation between Chris Olave and any of those guys, but there can be, if we're being honest, like I've seen Garrett Wilson going to the Falcons, right? Can you honestly sit there and tell me that Drake London is a head and shoulders above a Jameson Williams, where really the concern you have for Jameson Williams is getting back from that ACL tear that he suffered in January. But the way ACLs go now, it's more of a 9-month process than a 12, 13-month process. So he could be back and contribute to your team this season. And you don't want to draft that high just based off of half a year of production, right? You want to take the better of the two prospects. So I'm just looking at this draft and I see a ton of depth at a lot of positions. I just don't see a ton of superstars where you're like, man, this is a can't miss. I got to have them. I'm willing to leverage my draft and maybe next year's draft to move up. I think the only trades we've really seen so far, I think like the Patriots and the Texans are like swapping around like 5th and 6th round picks. And now there's some rumblings that maybe Darren Waller is being targeted by the Packers. And obviously that would include some draft picks there. So there's still some moving parts, but I do think this is going to be a pretty vanilla NFL draft is the best way I can put it. And That's why I think you see a guy like Travon Walker, who probably in years past, yeah, if there's a Joe Burrow, if there's a Trevor Lawrence at the top of the draft, Travon Walker's not going number one, right? Somebody is trading with the Jacksonville Jaguars to try to get up to that number one overall pick if there's a quarterback like that, but there's not. And so the Jaguars are sitting there. Not a lot of people are really worried about jumping up to grab that number one overall pick, because think about it. If you take an offensive tackle, then say you take an Evan Neal. A lot of people have Aquanu out of NC State ranked just as high or higher than Evan Neal right there, or Charles Cross out of Mississippi State ranked just as high as Evan Neal, right? So why would you trade up if there's three guys that you would take at that position? You look at wide receiver, right? No wide receiver is going to go number one overall out of this class. Look at the defensive ends, right? Aidan Hutchinson with his production, but then a lot of people still like what Kayvon Thibodeau did. Travon Walker has shot up. So there's three guys. Why would you leverage your draft class to get up to number one to pick a guy that you have two other guys reasonably within the same distance or the same grade as him? So there's not going to be a lot of movement. And so the Jaguars, I think what they're looking at is who's going to best fit on this defense. We already have Josh Allen, who is a phenomenal Pro Bowl level edge rusher. We need somebody on the other side of him. So that's why I think Travon Walker is probably going to end up being the guy. And then, yeah, Detroit's going to be super happy thinking that hometown guy there in Aidan Hutchinson at the number 2 overall pick. But I keep seeing all these labels like, here's why it would be a dramatic mistake. And then they go back to production from Travon Walker. I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I'm just trying to clear up misconceptions. The dude was not lining up right with just a foot in the ground, both hands free, kind of leaning over like a Von Miller for a majority of his career. He did have some snaps like that, but a majority of those came after the Adam Anderson suspension and some other injuries to Georgia's outside linebackers, right? Really, for the most part, you were seeing guys like Robert Bill and Nolan Smith as the stand-up outside linebackers for Georgia, and then Travon Walker with his hand in the dirt, either over the center or over a tackle, right? He is a true defensive lineman. You can put him wherever you need him, and then if the Jags get him, they could probably put some weight on that frame because the dude's a basketball player, right? We talked about his time at Upson Lee there in winning all kinds of state championships. I think they won over 60 consecutive games while he was a high school basketball player. So the dude's an athlete and could probably stand to put some weight on that frame. He ran a 4.51 at 275 pounds, right? You pack on 10, 15 more pounds, he's probably still running in the 4.6s, and you have a 290-pound defensive lineman who's running 4.6 and has arms that are as long as his legs and can get inside the chest of an offensive lineman and throw him away. There's a couple of plays from the national championship where he really, best way I can put it to the casual football fans is when you run stunts on a defensive line where you're trying to generate a pass rush, one of the guys is basically the fullback, where it's his job to get into the chest of a couple of the offensive linemen and clear up an alley for a guy who's coming around, wrapping around from the inside. If you watch the Falcons, they do this with Grady Jarrett a lot, where they'll have the defensive end crash down and just try to wedge off the offensive line. And then Grady Jarrett, because of how fast he is, kind of shoots his hand underneath and just basically bends around the line to create some pressure. Travon Walker can do that. And he can also stand up and play that edge rusher if you need him to. He can play any of those spots. Aidan Hutchinson ain't lining up at nose tackle. So that's kind of where I think the Jaguars are at right now. But again, they can still take an offensive lineman for all we know. That's the reason why we watch. Also, if you think I'm wrong and you think you are just the draft guru, you know what's going to happen in this draft, we encourage you to come hang out with us on Thursday at Coach's Corner. We'll be there starting at 2:00, going all the way through the first round at Coach's Corner. Come on in. We're going to have sheets for you to fill out for the draft. Top 10 picks, 1 through 10. Fill out who you think is going to be drafted where. And if you get the most correct, I want you to listen very carefully. John Henderson and the folks at Coach's Corner got a 70-inch flat screen TV for you. That's correct. A 70-inch flat screen TV for the person who gets the most picks out of the top 10 correct there at Coach's Corner. Limit 1 entry per person. But again, myself, Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, going to be hanging out at Coach's Corner on Thursday. Come in, fill it out before the first round starts, and hang out with us and watch those top 10 picks. See if you are going to be walking away with a 70-inch flat screen TV, courtesy of our friends there at Coach's Corner. That coming up on Thursday. Come hang out with us there. We got to take a quick break. We're going to come back. Bill Conley put out a preview for the Sun Belt. It's not looking good for Georgia Southern. We're going to dive into their schedule and why maybe this could be a tough, bumpy first year for head coach Clay Helton next, right here on ESPN Radio. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Christian Gokel, glad to have you hanging out with us here on this Tuesday afternoon. We just got done with a spring game there at Georgia Southern. 700 yards of total offense there for the Eagles on Saturday. But some big questions remain. What is this defense going to look like, right? That was one of the things we talked to Lindsey Goff from WTOC about yesterday. Was Clay Helton not necessarily concerned about that offense, but concerned about what the defense is going to look like. What's the identity? Because a complete revamp on that side of the football as well. And then I think the biggest thing, storylines going into 2022, number one, you are in your same division, right? Sun Belt East, but you got a whole lot of new additions coming in this year. Of course, App State remains, but you also add Marshall, James Madison, and Old Dominion to a division that includes Coastal Carolina and Georgia State. So a ton of really good football coming up. Coastal Carolina has become nationally relevant, consistently inside the top 25. They have their quarterback coming back this year. And then App State is App State. And then I'd say even in the state of Georgia, you're probably playing second fiddle right now to the folks up in Atlanta. So a really tough year coming up for Georgia Southern. And just looking at the schedule, right? You start with Morgan State at home, and you hope you can check that off as a win. But then you have two consecutive road games against really good football programs. You have to go out to Nebraska, which I know Nebraska's kind of been a running joke the last few years under Scott Frost, where, he was supposed to come home, be the savior of the program, and they just kind of been stuck in neutral out there, especially at the quarterback position. But if you go back and look at Nebraska from last year, they were one-score games, just a few one-score games away from potentially being a 10-win team, right? So Nebraska, a good football team, and they've made some upgrades there, especially at the quarterback position. So Nebraska is going to be a really tough one there in Lincoln. And then the very next week, you have to head out to Birmingham to take on a really good UAB squad. So two really good teams to start off with. Then you come home and you play a good Ball State team, but a team that you should beat. So I think, like, dream scenario, you're 3-1 at that point. And if you're 3-1, then you can really start to lock in and try to look at the bowl game. But I think realistically, Georgia Southern's looking at 2-2 through those first four games. And then it is just diving into the deep end of Sun Belt play. You head up to Conway to take on Coastal Carolina on October 1st. Then the very next week, you have a road trip up to Atlanta. So 5 weeks, one game at home. That's a pretty nasty stretch there for Georgia Southern. And Georgia State's going to be good. Coastal Carolina is going to be really good again as well. Then you come home and you're playing James Madison, and then you flip right around and you head to Norfolk, Virginia for your first trip up there to Old Dominion as a member of the Sun Belt. Come home, taking on South Alabama, and then you got to hit the road. And this is where that kind of the crossover hurts you. Your crossover, Louisiana. Where if Coastal Carolina ain't the best team in the Sun Belt, Louisiana is surely going to be. Even though Billy Napier has moved on, those players are still there. In Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns are going to be a good football team. Then you come home to wrap up the season with 2 games against Marshall, and then you take on App State to finish off the season. So, again, realistically, 6 wins is going to be a stretch for Georgia Southern in 2022. And, again, I hope I'm wrong. If you can take care of Morgan State, take care of business against Ball State, and then if you could get that Georgia State win, that'd be big time. But maybe take care of James Madison at Old Dominion, that puts you at 4, and then you'd have to win 2 out of 4 from South Alabama, Louisiana, Marshall, and App State. That's going to be tough for Georgia Southern in 2022. But that being said, I do think this is a really cool division and a lot of new additions in it, really kind of shaping the narrative of college football. But Bill Conley put out his 2022 projections there on ESPN.com, and he has App State ranked as the best team in the Sun Belt East, and he gives them a 96% chance to make a bowl game based off their schedule, followed up there by actually Marshall as the number 2 team there in the Sun Belt East with a 96% chance to make a bowl game. Believes that they'll be battling it out with App State for the top of this division. Coastal Carolina, they're losing some talent, but again, have a really good quarterback coming back in Grayson McCall that's going to lead that team. So it's going to be a fun division. But Georgia Southern fans, I'd say be patient. I know we talked about it yesterday, but the best thing I can tell you, be patient. It's gonna come with Clay Helton and this team, right? He came here, he kind of took a I shouldn't say kind of, he did take a reduced salary, still living off that buyout there from USC, but instead of paying all that money to him, he wanted it spread out so you can start developing facilities. You can get some recruiting coordinators in here that are going to try to up the recruiting base, which I think has already happened in Statesboro. You're pulling in 4-star running backs, right? And then spending it on a coaching staff. But again, it's going to take a little while to get the players you want in there and to develop them. And I know we talked yesterday about this is relatively similar, not completely similar to what happened up at Georgia Tech when they moved on from Paul Johnson, right? But you are still going from an option attack offense to an up tempo, throwing the football around 60, 70% of the time kind of an offense. And it's not just with wide receivers and quarterbacks, right? You're recruiting different kind of offensive linemen. It's going to take a minute to get this team trucking. And I do think with the talent they have on the team, with the coaching staff, and with the style they run, they're going to beat somebody they're not supposed to. And I think that's what it's going to take if you have any sort of hope for a postseason there in Statesboro. But I think it's going to head in the right direction. I think more so than anything, it's not going to look like it did last year, where there wasn't a whole lot of fight in the team after the first few weeks in the season, right? So I think it's going to be a fun team to watch. I think there's got a lot of really talented players on it, but also just kind of in a brutal division there. Probably the best, I think, as Bill Connolly put it, the best G5 division, right? Basically, the SEC West of the G5 is what Georgia Southern's having to deal with a first year coach there, some new coordinators. And again, he's a 6-year senior, but also a new quarterback there as well in Van Treese. So whole lot of moving parts there at Georgia Southern, but I do think an exciting year coming up in 2022. We got Braves baseball coming up for you a little bit later. They start a 3-game set with the Chicago Cubs, and some breaking news coming out a little bit earlier about one of the key contributors for the Braves going to be out for a little while. We'll break it all down next when we come back right here on Second Down on ESPN Radio. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko. Glad to have you here with us on ESPN Radio. We have an awesome pitching matchup coming up for you a little bit later this evening as the Braves host the Chicago Cubs. Marcus Stroman, Braves fans very familiar with him during his time with the New York Mets. He'll be on the mound for the Cubs tonight going up against Max Fried, who seems to have gotten things together. Best outing of the year last time out. And Marcus Stroman, hopefully we can keep his season going for him a little bit. 0-2 with over an 8 ERA right now. So Braves coming off of a bye. Actually, that's my football terms. Off day.
Bye day.
Bye day.
Yeah.
Just thinking of football terms. An off day yesterday, taking on Marcus Stroman there. And the Chicago Cubs. Cubs 7-9 entering this one. The Braves 7-10. But of some concern for the Atlanta Braves, last year's postseason hero, no, not Jorge Soler, the other one, Eddie Rosario, the one that you re-signed to a 2-year, $18 million deal. He has been pretty bad so far this season, less than 100 batting average, right? Last time out, 0 for 2 once he came in to the game. And apparently there was a reasoning behind it. He's going to have laser correction surgery for blurred vision.
Wow.
In one of his eyes. Atlanta Braves outfielder Eddie Rosario saw a retinal specialist on Monday and will undergo a laser procedure in the coming days to correct blurred vision and swelling in his right eye, the team announced. So, the fact that he was hitting .068 with 3 hits and 44 at-bats, no RBIs, and 10 strikeouts, hopefully that's the issue.
That's a lot, man. Can you imagine trying to bat like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. Literally batting with one eye closed.
Yeah, hitting a baseball that's coming, 95, 100 miles an hour at you anyway.
Right.
Or, 85, 90 miles an hour with some movement. Like, goodness gracious. That's hard enough as it is.
Now, there is some hope on the horizon. Ronald Acuna is continuing his rehab stint with the Gwinnett Stripers. He's 4 games into it. He's been batting .417 during his time down there with Gwinnett. Down there, up there, he's been in Jacksonville playing. So
that's down there.
Down there, but I guess over there would be a better term.
For where?
Everything's up there from here. Except Jacksonville, which is down there.
Yeah.
But if we're talking like in relative terms to the Braves, it'd be over there.
Does it bother you as much as it does me? Like I talk to a lot of people from the north, and they're always like, "Well, you're up there in Georgia," and I'm like, "Stop saying that.
What?
Don't,
no,
stop.
Gross. Don't do that."
Yeah. Or like, I can't wait till you come down here. I'm like, I'm not going down anywhere. If I'm going farther away from the north if I go down anywhere. Anyway, but no, you're right.
Yeah, no.
And thankfully, hitting over 400 is better than 068. So.
Well, it's AAA batting.
That's okay. All right. I mean,
I kind of agree with you though. Last thing you want is to rush a guy like Acuna back, but that being said, it's a little bit different than other sports where there's no contact really that they're having to deal with.
True.
And if you can play center field in AAA, you can play center field in the majors.
Yeah.
It's not like there's like a steeper gradient or like a different playing surface.
Yeah.
Still baseball.
No, for sure. I think with me, it's just more like if he's going 100% every night in AAA, you're exactly right. But if there was still, a little bit of a hesitation, if he wasn't playing every night, if he was at, 75, 80% production wise or something like that, that's when, it looks tempting when you're 7-10 to bring him up if he's playing well, but isn't going 100%. Right. But if he's at 100% already, I completely agree with you. That's mainly what I mean. Like you said, there's no contact, or there's a minimal amount of contact. If there is any, it's out, of the norm, and everything like that. So yeah, no, I'm 100% with you there.
So if I have to imagine what we're going to see is probably Marcel still DHing. I guess kind of what we saw a couple days ago. Marcel DHing, Orlando Arcia playing left field, and Guillermo Heredia, and then playing center, and then Adam Duvall probably playing right. I guess you could swap those guys. Adam Duvall's played some center field as well, but Arcia, Heredia, and Duvall playing the outfield with Azuna DHing. If I had to imagine, or if you wanted a different bat in there and you don't want Arcia and Heredia in there, Dickerson, I guess, could DH, and he had a home run a couple games back. He could DH, and then you can put Azuna out there, but then that defense is getting real interesting.
Yeah.
Nice beer league softball defense out there.
Yeah. I mean,
A lot of loafing.
That's the thing, right? Is you can go out there and make solid baseball plays, but you're just in for one. I would bank on 1 to 1.5. I'd put the over under at 1.5, kind of bonehead type of plays. It's like back when at the end, well, not even at the end, a long time through. It was just Manny being Manny out there.
Yeah.
Just that every now and then, just something crazy would happen. He'd make a spectacular play, but then there would just be some bonehead thing going on. Like, it's kind of like that, just without the spectacular plays. Ozuna in the outfield will make the plays you would expect an outfielder to make, and then all of a sudden, just like a ball will land right next to him. I'll be like, what's going on?
Yeah, no, it's rough, and it's like it's not even like the ones where like, God, that was terrible. It's just more like no one is afraid to run on Marcell Ozuna.
Yeah,
like Aidan Duvall ain't bad, but like no one is afraid to run on Marcell Ozuna. If there's like a thought, you're heading to second, I could probably stretch it to third. You're like, oh, it's Ozuna. Yeah, I'm stretching it to third.
I'm going.
That's
you
kind of.
Don't even have to have the thought. Yeah,
that's kind of where that's at. But that being said, 7:20 first pitch. Max Fried, Marcus Stroman. We'll let you know in the next few minutes if they drop the lineup. What we're seeing, but again, if I had to imagine, probably a combination of Marcell Ozuna, Orlando Arcia, Guillermo Heredia, and Adam Duvall. And then, if Austin Riley can keep raking, Matt Olson's been unbelievable so far this year. Just get Ozzy Albies keep doing what he's doing. And if Dansby can, I hope he doesn't have swelling his right eye.
Well,
because that's been rough.
Well, it's one thing. It's like, at least now there's a reason. Or do you kind of hope there is so that there's a reason at least?
It makes sense, right? That something is wrong with Eddie Rosario because
really wrong.
Well, yeah, because I know everyone pointed to do you want to sign him off of one great postseason? And he was unbelievable in the postseason. I think he hit like 357 in the postseason. He hit over 500 in the NLCS, but he hit over 350 in the postseason. Bunch of extra base hits, had 3 home runs in the NLCS. So he was one of the heroes of the postseason. But before that, he was still batting 257 in his time, or before he got to the Braves last year. So he wasn't batting 068.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He had some pop to him. So, I mean, there was obviously something wrong. So hopefully you can get him back. And then in the future, potentially you're looking at Marcell Ozuna DHing, Ronald Acuna in center field, Eddie Rosario in left field, and Adam Duvall in right field. And that's just a whole different story.
Yeah.
So it's just
strong.
Braves kind of just trying to tread water right now until number 13 gets back.
Yeah.
I tell you got Ozzy Albies, Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Adam Duvall, and Ronald Acuna Jr. in the same lineup. It's pretty damn good.
Man, that's getting back to the lineup you mentioned to me a couple weeks ago. That is just like, man, I don't see a hole in here at all. But man, it's all
Dansby right now is kind of creating one, but hopefully it's just a slow start for old Mr. Swanson. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back right here on Second Down. PJ, we had a listener write in and say, "Hey, you should have saved your Trevon Walker dissertation for today because today is National Dissertation Day."
That's actually a really good point.
I don't
That would have been
appreciate
very
that.
interesting.
I don't think it was a dissertation. I think it was a clarification.
Oh, well, I mean,
I appreciate him writing in.
let me look up what dissertation means real quick.
Basically, if I'm trying to get my doctorates there, I have to write out my old dissertation and submit that to be approved before I can graduate. Yeah.
Right.
So like
okay.
I would do my dissertation on why everyone is wrong about Trevon Walker.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. Sorry, that was a very BJ word. I feel like BJ. Yeah, you and BJ like know what that is off the top of your head.
Words mean things, PJ.
I mean, they certainly do. I just don't use dissertation a lot. I don't think a lot of people use dissertation a lot. So I feel like if you polled 15 people, probably like 12 of them wouldn't really be confident on what that means. I feel like they would have an idea, but they wouldn't know exactly.
I don't know that that's true.
Come on now.
I don't know.
You think?
I think there might be like you and one other guy.
Okay.
And he's definitely wearing a number 3 hat.
All right. What is that supposed to mean? Which, like, again, I'm not saying they don't completely know what it means. Like me, I had an idea of what it was, but I wasn't confident in what it was.
Do you have the
of
Webster's dictionary right there, the definition?
Doctor philosophy, whatever you said.
I don't think it's a philosophy.
Yeah, I did look it up.
All right, let's hear it.
A long essay on a particular subject. Which is basically that is kind of
that was yesterday's first segment.
It's the second part, which I think kind of clarifies what this exact word means, and which is what you dove into, especially one written as a requirement for the Doctor of Philosophy. So, like, I knew that first part. I didn't know the second part, right? Well, I wasn't confident in the second part.
I think you were like, "Are you dissing me?" Right
no,
now?
Not at all. Good God.
Are you dissing me?
No, no. When someone says dissertation, I meant so like, okay, in my head, I was like a long explanation of something where you're trying to prove someone else wrong, or not even prove someone else wrong. Like, but you're
trying to prove your point.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know about the Doctor of Philosophy part and all that kind of stuff. Like, I that did not come up in my mind when I heard dissertation. So yeah, you don't feel like just the common people.
Are you trying to call common people dumb or
No!
ill-informed?
What? Why is it dumb?
Lindsay did that yesterday. She said college people or college kids weren't real people.
Let's knock this out of the park, right? Why is it dumb if you simply with a word like dissertation, you know the general idea.
Wait, why do you want to knock this out of the park?
Whatever.
You want to put
we were talking about baseball.
You want to squash this?
Yeah, sure. Because words mean things.
Yeah, I thought like knock it out of the park meant like you were doubling down. Like you were like, let's show I'm right.
That's what I mean. But like, why? People do this all the time, right? Like,
I don't know. Do you know what an essay?
Like a word like dissertation, right? Like you know the general idea of what the word means, but just because you don't know the inner workings and like everything about the word, and like the last part of that definition, just because you don't know that part, you're ignorant or you're dumb.
I didn't say ignorant or dumb.
I mean, you started going that way, man.
I just think I give the general public more credit than you do.
Probably. I am very skeptical. Yeah. I'm optimistic about a lot of things. I'm optimistic about like situations and stuff. But when it comes to just kind of people, I can be very skeptical without a doubt. Even about myself, for sure.
Going to do a dissertation about finding out what dissertation means?
I hope not.
And why? No, you should do a dissertation about why the average person doesn't actually know what dissertation means.
I think they know mostly what it means. I don't think the last part would come to their
All right.
mind.
Well, now we have to go out on the street and ask people if they know what dissertation means.
Yeah, for sure. And see if they have.
You said a group of 15 people?
Yeah. I think
that's your subject group?
Yeah.
And you said 12 of them wouldn't.
That's a very odd fraction.
But you said 12 of them wouldn't.
15.
And then 3 of them have their doctorates in philosophy.
So like 4/5. Yeah.
Right.
See, that's quick math. See, I'm not dumb.
Well, anything beats 5th, 3rd. I'll leave that one. I'll leave that one alone. So again, I don't I guess yesterday kind of was a dissertation. It was more of a argument, and I think argument has a very negative connotation now.
Yeah.
I think anybody here in this station, probably to my detriment or their detriment, and their just mental health, knows I like to argue. But like I don't do it in a terms of like I want anger
No,
and
yeah.
vitriol. I like to have conversations and I like point counterpoint.
Well, see, I think that's more of the. You like to argue, but you like what I would call like combative, but not in a bad way.
Combative?
Like, no, like not in a bad way.
Now there's combat
like
involved?
back and forth. Yeah, there's back and forth all the time. But
There's
but
back
you
and
learn-
forth in
but-
ping pong.
but
That doesn't
you-
mean it's
but
combative.
You learn something from it all the time. Like someone's learning something. Like you
No, I think of it more like catch. You're just tossing it
that's a
back
good
and
way,
forth.
yeah.
There's nothing combative about a nice friendly game of
can
catch.
be, man.
You're
Right?
just violently throwing it at it.
No, not like
No,
violently, but like you start one guy starts throwing a little bit harder, and then you feel like you have to. Like, yeah.
No, you know you're winning an
So
argument
that
when the other
happens in
person gets
conversations
loud.
here all the time.
You know you're winning the argument when the other person gets loud.
Yeah.
Because
No,
the other
absolutely.
person starts yelling and they get emotional. You know you're winning the argument. Even if you're wrong.
To a certain extent.
Even if you're wrong, you're winning the argument. If you let emotions get into it, you're winning it.
What? See, this is the difference, I guess, is like I don't have arguments to win arguments. I'd rather just, try and learn something from what the other person
Well,
is
yeah,
trying to
but
say,
as soon as the other person
and
gets
hopefully the other person
but as soon as the
trying to
other
do the
person
same
gets
thing.
emotional or you can see the crack in their armor, then you just got to go for the kill.
Why do you have to go for a kill?
Because it's fun.
That's combative.
'Cause it's fun.
Christian, you're proving my point.
Not all of our conversations go like that. I'm mostly just referring to Kevin.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Because Kevin does like to say wild things, and then when you try to get him to like expunge on the situation,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
or if you try to get him to even expand on the situation, he just gets mad.
I only have like
Kind of hit you with the
Yeah. I only have conversations with like certain people, like conversations like that with certain people, because my like pet peeve is like everyone tries to start talking before you're done talking.
that happens to PJ a lot.
But no, it's not
We
even,
literally call it getting PJ'd.
it's like, yeah, they're trying to like, I'm halfway through my point and it's like they start answering or like going off that. And I'm like, I'm not even done with my point. How do you know what to argue? Anyway. We're probably
No,
about
we
to
know
be out
because
here
we
in a
don't
second.
we don't actually listen. We're just formulating our next response in our head before you finish talking, and then we don't absorb anything you say,
Exactly.
and then we just respond.
It's like, how do you know?
Such is the way of life here at ESPN Coastal. The guys for 3 and Out with the day off, they will be back tomorrow.